She built a $4 million mansion on land that wasn't hers, mine. And somehow, everyone acted like that was fine. No questions, no pushback, just paperwork quietly shuffled into place. But the thing is, when you grow up reading maps and watching how lines get moved, you start to notice what others miss. What she buried wasn't just property. It was a promise someone made long ago and hoped no one would dig up. I did. And what happened next is the kind of story we tell here on QA Stories. So, tell me if it were, would you let it go? She built it, right where my house was supposed to go. The HOA. President in my neighborhood, let's call her Cheryl, built her $4 million dream mansion on my land. My land. But here's what she didn't count on. I'm a high school geography teacher who knows how to read old city maps. And when I started digging through those dusty property records, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. That land wasn't just mine, it was supposed to be a children's park. I'm Connor, and this is how I brought down her entire empire with one perfectly legal trap. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because you're going to want to share this story with everyone you know. I just closed on this beautiful piece of vacant land in Meadowbrook Estates. Nothing fancy, just wanted to build a modest home. The lot was quiet, shaded by oaks. I could already see my future porch. After years of renting cramped apartments and dealing with neighbors who played music until 3 in the morning, I thought I'd finally found my slice of peace. The real estate agent had been almost too eager to close the deal now that I think about it. Great investment opportunity, she kept saying, which should have been my first red flag. But I was 35 years old, tired of throwing money away on rent, and this seemed like my chance to finally put down roots somewhere. Then this pristine white Escalade pulls up, and out steps Cheryl. She looked like she'd stepped off a luxury real estate ad, flawless, polished, calculating. Everything about her screamed expensive, from her designer handbag to the way she carried herself like she owned the entire neighborhood, which, as I would later discover, wasn't too far from the truth. "Welcome to Meadowbrook Estates," she announces, but I can see her mentally cataloging every detail of my property. Her eyes swept across my land like she was taking inventory, noting where I'd placed my surveyor's stakes and the small pile of potential building materials I'd optimistically stacked near the oak tree. What follows is a 20-minute lecture about regulations I never asked for. No black garbage bins, no paint outside the HOA, approved beige spectrum, mailboxes must be exactly 42 inches tall. Wait, what? I actually had to stop and stare at her after that one. These trees have probably been here since before I was born, and now she's telling me they need approval to exist. That can't be right, can it? I faked a polite smile. But every rule she listed felt like a thread pulling tight around my chest. Looking back, I should have realized this wasn't about community standards. This was about control. She pulls out this thick binder from her car, and I mean thick. It thudded into my hands like a warning, weighty, over-tabbed, and ready to crush any hope of individuality. "This is your HOA, Covenant Handbook," she says, dropping it into my hands like it's the 10 Commandments. The thing weighs about 5 pounds and has more tabs than a medical textbook. I'm flipping through pages of regulations about grass height, fence materials, and acceptable shades of beige for house paint. It's like someone took all the joy out of home ownership and turned it into a corporate training manual. While Cheryl's busy explaining the fine details of seasonal decoration compliance, my elderly neighbor waves from his garden. He's got dirt under his fingernails and a genuine smile that's the complete opposite of Cheryl's plastic perfection. The contrast is striking. Here's this guy who looks like he actually enjoys living in his own home, while Cheryl treats the neighborhood like a business she's managing. After she drives off in her ridiculous Escalade, trailing a cloud of expensive perfume and unspoken threats, he ambles over with that friendly, unhurried pace that only retired people seem to master. "Nice to finally see some young blood moving in," he says, then adds almost casually, "You know they had big plans for a community park right around here back in the early 90s. Beautiful designs, too, playground, walking trails, the works. Funny how projects like that just disappear, you know?" The way he says it makes my skin prickle. There's something in his tone, not quite warning, not quite regret, but definitely not casual conversation. He shrugs and heads back to his tomatoes, leaving me with an odd feeling I can't shake. I stand there holding that massive HOA binder, watching him tend to his garden with the kind of peaceful contentment I'd hoped to find here myself. But now, I'm wondering what exactly happened to that park project, and why a man who's probably lived here for decades feels the need to mention it to the new guy. Looking back, I should have asked more questions right then and there, but honestly, I was still processing the fact that someone actually made a rule about garbage can colors. 3 weeks later, I'm drinking my morning coffee when the mail carrier hands me a certified letter. The return address says Meadowbrook Estates HOA Urgent in bold red letters that somehow managed to look threatening even in Times New Roman font. Inside, notice of unauthorized construction activity. Immediate compliance required or legal action will be pursued. I read it twice, then a third time, thinking maybe I'm missing something obvious. Maybe I'm going crazy here, but unauthorized construction. The letter claims I'm encroaching on recently acquired HOA common area and demands I halt all illegal building activities immediately. I walk outside and stare at my completely unchanged piece of land, wondering if I've somehow entered an alternate dimension where thinking about building a house counts as actual construction. A quick investigation reveals that Cheryl somehow purchased a narrow strip of abandoned public land that runs directly along my eastern property line. The paperwork looks official stamped and notarized, but something about the whole thing feels off. The timing is too convenient, the price too low, and the description too vague. When did this become abandoned? And how did she even know it was available? That night, I spread my property survey and the HOA documents across my kitchen table, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. The strip of land Cheryl bought is positioned perfectly for someone planning to expand eastward, right toward the exact spot where I'm planning to build my house. I hadn't moved a single rock, so why was I being accused of illegal construction? But here's what really makes my blood run cold. If Cheryl knew exactly when and where to buy that strip of land, what else does she know about my property that I don't? And more terrifying, how long has she been watching this lot, waiting for the right moment to strike? I spend the next weekend playing detective at the city planning office, and let me tell you, it's exactly as depressing as it sounds. As a teacher, I know how to research, and I've got nothing but time and a growing sense that something's seriously wrong here. Outdated zoning maps, fluorescent lights, that sterile bureaucracy smell. But I'm determined to figure out what game Cheryl is playing, even if it means spending my Saturday surrounded by filing cabinets and the dreams of bureaucrats who gave up years ago. What I discover makes my blood pressure spike in ways that probably aren't healthy for someone my age. Cheryl hasn't just acquired one convenient strip of land. Over the past 5 years, she's systematically purchased 7 different parcels of unclaimed, abandoned, or surplus public land scattered throughout our neighborhood. Every single purchase was dirt cheap, we're talking pennies on the dollar, and every single piece is perfectly positioned around prime real estate. Cheryl had mapped this out like a general before a land war. The pattern is so obvious once you see it that I can't believe nobody else has noticed. But then again, who spends their weekends digging through municipal property records? When I ask Ben Carter at the planning office about these transactions, he barely looks up from his computer screen. The guy's probably in his 40s, with the kind of defeated expression you get from years of dealing with bureaucracy and impossible deadlines. Look, public land sitting empty is just wasted taxpayer money, he says with a shrug that screams practiced indifference. Good thing someone around here recognizes the potential. That word potential hits me like a slap. This isn't coincidence, this is strategy. I'm not sure I'm explaining myself well here, but the way he says it makes it sound like this has been discussed before, like there's some understanding between certain people about how these things work. The guy's practically reciting talking points like he's had this exact conversation multiple times before. I asked to see the original documentation for these land sales, and suddenly Ben becomes very interested in his computer screen again. His fingers start clicking keys with the kind of nervous energy you get when you're trying to look busy while avoiding a conversation. Those files might be in storage, he mumbles without making eye contact. Could take weeks to retrieve them. Right. Weeks to retrieve public records about public land. Nothing suspicious about that at all. I want to ask him why it takes weeks to find files about transactions that happened in the digital age, but something about his body language tells me I'm not going to get a straight answer. I leave the planning office feeling like I've just discovered the tip of an iceberg, and I'm pretty sure the Titanic is somewhere nearby. The real breakthrough comes at the county library's historical archives, which is basically where old government documents go to die in peace. buried in a dusty filing cabinet that probably hasn't been opened since the Clinton administration, I opened the manila folder marked Harmony Park, 1992. The librarian who helped me find it looked at me like I was either very dedicated to my research or completely insane, probably a little of both, honestly. There it was, Harmony Park, fully funded, fully built, and now gone. The proposed location, right where Cheryl's mansion is currently under construction. According to the documentation, this project was unanimously approved and fully funded with $2.3 million in taxpayer money. But here's where it gets really weird, and I mean skin-crawlingly weird. I compare the 1992 park proposal map with current property records, and I spot something that makes my hands shake. The boundary lines have been quietly altered. Someone has taken a red pen to history and redrawn reality to suit their needs. The original park boundaries included not just Cheryl's current construction site, but also most of the abandoned land parcels she's been buying up over the past 5 years. It's like watching a magic trick in reverse. Instead of making something appear, someone has systematically erased an entire community park from the official records. My elbows dug into the dusty metal desk as I traced red lines across history that no one else had dared connect. The more I study these documents, the more questions pile up like storm clouds. How does a fully approved, fully funded public park just disappear from all current records? Who authorized the boundary changes? And why is the only evidence of this project buried in an archive that most people don't even know exists? I photocopy everything I can find, including some additional budget documents that show the park construction was actually completed in 1994. Not just approved, not just funded, actually built. Families used this park for years before it somehow vanished from official existence. I realize I'm not dealing with some petty HOA power trip anymore. This is something much bigger, much more calculated, and much more disturbing. Walking back to my car, I have to pass right by Cheryl's construction site, and the irony hits me like a physical blow. The workers are pouring concrete for what's obviously going to be an in-ground swimming pool, right where the park's playground equipment was supposed to go. I stand there watching concrete flow into what should have been swing-set foundations, and it was like watching a burial shovels replaced by cement mixers, grief poured in slabs. The construction crew doesn't even look up as I stare at them, probably thinking I'm just another curious neighbor, admiring the progress on the neighborhood's newest mansion. If only they knew they were building a swimming pool on top of stolen dreams and buried community plans. But here's the question that's really eating at me. If Cheryl has the power to make an entire approved funded public park disappear from official records without anyone noticing for 30 years, what happens to people who try to expose her? And am I about to find out the hard way? Armed with my research, I decide it's time to stop playing nice and start asking the hard questions that nobody else seems willing to ask. I draft a formal letter to the HOA, board requesting clarification regarding the discrepancy between the 1992 Harmony Park proposal and current property boundaries. I include photocopies of both the original park plans and current property records, with all the differences highlighted in bright red marker. If this is all just a big misunderstanding, Cheryl should be able to clear it up easily, right? I mean, honest mistakes happen all the time in government paperwork. Property lines get confused, old documents get misfiled, records get lost in transitions between administrations. Surely there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for why a $2.3 million community park somehow transformed into Cheryl's private backyard. The HOA office is located in a small building that also houses an insurance agency and a tax preparation service, the kind of strip mall setup that screams professional but not too expensive. The receptionist takes my letter without even looking up from her magazine. She doesn't even ask what it's about. But something about her tone makes me think she knows exactly who I am and what I'm trying to stir up. Word travels fast in neighborhoods like this, especially when someone starts asking questions about things that are supposed to stay buried. 2 days after I submit my letter, my phone rings at 7 in the morning. Cheryl's voice comes through the speaker with that practiced sweetness that makes my skin crawl. "Connor, let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. Come by, let's chat privately." There's something about the way she says chat privately that sounds less like problem solving and more like threat making, the kind of offer you get from people who are used to making problems disappear through private conversations and unofficial agreements. If it's just outdated paperwork, I reply, trying to keep my voice steady, Then you won't mind explaining the discrepancy to the entire HOA at next week's meeting. The silence stretches so long I wonder if she hung up, and when it finally breaks, I can practically hear her recalculating her approach. When she finally speaks again, there's no sweetness left in her voice at all, just the kind of cold calculation that makes you realize you're dealing with someone who has been playing this game much longer than you have. I don't think that's necessary, Connor. Some things are better handled through proper channels. Proper channels, right, because there's nothing more proper than building your mansion on stolen parkland and hoping nobody notices. After I hang up, I realize I've just crossed a line I can't uncross, and I have the distinct feeling that Cheryl is about to show me exactly what happens to people who don't appreciate the value of private conversations. But what terrifies me most isn't what she might do to me, it's realizing that if she can erase a public park from existence, she's probably made other problems disappear too. And I'm about to become her next problem. Within a week, one envelope had a coffee stain. Another had perfect corners like it had been ironed. Together they felt like trophies from a war I hadn't agreed to fight. Grass height exceeds regulation standards. My grass is perfectly normal, maybe even a little short compared to my neighbor's jungle of a lawn. Vehicle parked in violation of community guidelines. My truck is in my own driveway exactly where trucks are supposed to be parked. Improper waste container placement. My trash can was exactly where it's supposed to be, same place I've put it every week since moving in. They made reading on my porch sound like domestic terrorism. I became my own crime scene tech photo angles, timestamp alignment, cross-referencing like it was my full-time job. Photos with timestamps, witness statements from the few neighbors brave enough to talk to me, copies of all correspondence. I'm building a case, but I'm also getting a crystal clear picture of what happens to people who cross Cheryl. It's like watching a medieval siege in slow motion. She's not trying to win through direct confrontation, but rather to make my life so miserable that I'll surrender just to make it stop. The scary part is, it's almost working. There's only so much bureaucratic harassment a person can take before they start questioning whether fighting back is worth the stress, especially when you're dealing with someone who has clearly perfected the art of making other people's lives hell while maintaining plausible deniability. The breaking point comes when I find a notice taped to my front door, claiming that my unauthorized surveying activities are causing community safety concerns. That's when I decide I need professional help, because clearly I'm dealing with someone who has turned property harassment into an art form, and I'm just a high school teacher who thought buying land would be the hard part. Frank Miller comes recommended by a teacher friend who went through a nasty divorce and needed someone who understood how to fight dirty while staying within legal boundaries. He's older, experienced, and has that calm, strategic mind I need right now. Frank's office smelled like old paper and quiet strategy. I spread all my evidence across his conference table, the park plans, the altered boundaries, the suspicious land purchase, the retaliatory violations. Frank studies everything with a magnifying glass, making notes in his precise handwriting, like he's documenting evidence for a murder trial. After what feels like an hour, he looks up with an expression I can't quite read. "Connor, this isn't just about your property line anymore," Frank says, tapping his pen against the desk, while choosing his words carefully like he's defusing a bomb instead of giving legal advice. "If you're right about this park proposal, we're looking at potential fraud, real fraud, the kind that could bring down more than just an HOA president." He meets my eyes with the kind of serious expression that makes you realize your life is about to change in ways you can't predict. But here's what you need to understand once we start pulling on this thread. There's no telling what's going to unravel. Are you absolutely sure you're prepared for whatever we might find? Frank leaned in, tapping the folder. "Connor, this might not just be zoning fraud. This might bring everything down." Cheryl escalates from petty violations to full-scale character assassination faster than I thought possible. And suddenly I understand why that old saying about hell having no fury like a woman scorned doesn't specify what she's been scorned about. Suddenly I'm the neighborhood pariah, like I've got some kind of social disease that might be contagious if people get too close to me. The whispers start small but spread like wildfire through the community. Financial problems, troublemaker, probably mentally unstable, and my personal favorite, that teacher who thinks he's some kind of detective. The woman across the street who once offered zucchini now rushes her toddler inside like I'm contagious. Even the mail carrier gives me weird looks, Like maybe I'm the type of person who might snap and do something crazy to innocent postal workers who are just trying to do their jobs. I don't know what's worse, I tell myself one evening, staring at my reflection in the kitchen window, while the sun sets behind Cheryl's growing mansion. Being angry at Cheryl for spreading lies or being disappointed in neighbors I thought I could trust. It's like watching a social experiment in real time, how quickly people will turn on someone when the right person plants the right seeds of doubt. These are the same people who smiled and welcomed me to the neighborhood just a few months ago, and now they act like I'm carrying some kind of plague that might infect their property values. I used to hear the kid next door practicing trumpet through the window. Now silence sits there like a punishment. The psychological warfare gets more sophisticated as the weeks go by, and I have to admit Cheryl has skills that would impress a military strategist. Anonymous flyers start appearing on windshields throughout the neighborhood. Concerned residents, is our neighborhood safe? Followed by vague implications about new residents who refuse to follow community standards, and individuals who seem determined to cause trouble for law-abiding families. The flyers never mention my name directly, but everyone knows exactly who they're talking about. It's like being accused of a crime without anyone having the courage to say what you supposedly did. I find one of these flyers under my own windshield wiper, and I have to admire the audacity. Cheryl is so confident in her campaign that she's not even bothering to hide her tactics anymore. The really insidious part is how she's managed to make my perfectly reasonable questions about public land seem like the obsessive ravings of an unstable person. He's been harassing city workers. I overhear one neighbor telling someone at the grocery store, spending all his time at government offices demanding to see documents about things that happened 30 years ago. The way she says it makes it sound like researching public records is evidence of mental illness rather than civic responsibility. I want to tap her on the shoulder and explain that 30 years ago was 1992, not ancient history, but something tells me that facts aren't going to change her mind at this point. My elderly neighbor friend stops by, looking nervous, glancing around like he's worried about being seen talking to me by the wrong people. "Connor, I like you, but people are talking. Maybe you should just let this whole thing go." He won't meet my eyes when he says it, and I can see how much it hurts him to even suggest backing down. I know it doesn't seem fair, but sometimes it's better to move somewhere else than to fight battles you can't win. I want to be angry at him for suggesting surrender, but I can see the genuine concern in his weathered face. He's probably right from a practical standpoint. Life would definitely be easier if I just packed up and started over somewhere else. Somewhere without HOA. Presidents who steal parks and turn neighbors against each other. But then I think about all the other people who might have had the same thought over the years, and I realize that's exactly how people like Cheryl stay in power. The final straw comes on a Tuesday morning when I discover all 4 of my tires are completely flat. Every tire sat like a corpse, quiet, obedient flat. They wanted me to feel stuck. No evidence, no witnesses, but the message is crystal clear. We can get to you anytime we want, anywhere we want, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. Standing in my driveway at 6 in the morning, looking at my disabled truck while Cheryl's mansion rises in the distance like a monument to theft and corruption. I stared at the flat tires like crime scene evidence. My breath didn't catch it, retreated. I wasn't angry, I was exhausted, hunted. The symbolism is perfect. I'm literally going nowhere while her dream house gets closer to completion every day. For about 10 minutes, I seriously consider giving up, moving somewhere else, starting over, pretending none of this ever happened, and chalking it up to an expensive lesson about the importance of researching neighborhoods before buying property. I even start mentally calculating how much money I'd lose if I sold the land and walked away, and honestly, it might be worth it just to get my life back to normal. But then I think about that faded park proposal, about swing sets and picnic tables that never got built, about the community space stolen from families who don't even know what they lost. You know that moment when everything in you wants to quit, but something deeper won't let you. When you have to decide if you're going to fight back or just walk away with your tail between your legs. I call Frank with my decision, and I can hear my own voice shaking, with a mixture of fear and determination. "They messed with my car, Frank. I'm done playing defense." "You want to file a police report?" he asks, and I can tell he already knows what my answer is going to be. "No, I want to go nuclear. Hit them where it really hurts." As I hang up and stare at Cheryl's construction site, watching workers pour concrete for her stolen swimming pool, I realize I'm about to cross a line I can't uncross. The question haunting me isn't whether I'm fighting for justice or making the biggest mistake of my life. It's whether I have the strength to see this through. And as I stare at Cheryl's swimming pool rising from the ruins, I finally understand this isn't harassment. It's war. Frank and I file a formal lawsuit alleging fraudulent property acquisition and demanding a full investigation into the missing park project, and for the first time in months, I feel like I'm finally fighting back, instead of just absorbing punishment. We're confident, prepared, and absolutely certain we're about to nail Cheryl to the wall with evidence that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. I spend the week before the hearing practicing my testimony, organizing my evidence, and imagining the look on Cheryl's face when the judge rules in our favor. Frank seems optimistic too, talking about precedent cases and legal strategies with the kind of enthusiasm that makes you think victory is just a formality, just a matter of presenting the facts to a reasonable judge who will see the obvious truth. We couldn't have been more wrong. Sometimes confidence is just inexperience wearing a fancy suit, and sometimes the other side has weapons you didn't even know existed. The courtroom itself smelled like regret mildew, and the kind of silence that says, "Don't expect justice." I arrive early, clutching my folder of evidence like it's a life preserver, watching other people file in for their own legal battles. Frank looks calm and professional in his best suit, the kind of lawyer you'd want representing you if you were innocent and the evidence was on your side. Which we are. And it is so, what could possibly go wrong? Cheryl doesn't just defend herself. She goes on the offensive with both barrels loaded and aimed directly at my credibility, and suddenly I understand why generals study her type of tactical thinking in military schools. Her countersuit alleges that I'm guilty of systematic harassment, defamation of character, and malicious interference with legitimate business activities. Her lawyer is everything ours isn't expensive, smooth, and clearly connected to people who matter in this town. The guy probably charges more per hour than I make in a week, and he carries himself with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about losing. During the preliminary hearing, he makes our evidence look circumstantial, and our case look like the revenge fantasy of an unstable neighbor with too much time on his hands. This is not a legal case. It's a personal vendetta, Your Honor, dressed up in dusty paperwork and imagined history. The way he says it makes 30-year-old government documents sound like ancient scrolls discovered in some archaeological dig, completely irrelevant to modern property law. He presents Cheryl as a pillar of the community, a dedicated volunteer who has worked tirelessly to improve property values and maintain neighborhood standards, while painting me as an obsessive troublemaker who can't accept that sometimes old plans get changed for perfectly legitimate reasons. The devastating ruling hits like a sledgehammer to everything I thought I knew about justice and fairness, and I realize that having the truth on your side doesn't mean much if the other side has better lawyers and more influence. The judge isn't impressed with our circumstantial evidence and conspiracy theories, which apparently is how dusty government documents and property records get classified when they're inconvenient for wealthy defendants. His ruling is brief and brutal. Mr. Connor, unless you can produce concrete evidence of intentional fraud, this appears to be nothing more than a property dispute between neighbors. Case dismissed pending presentation of substantial new evidence. Just like that, months of research and preparation get swept away like they never existed. It felt like someone had erased my footprints, like I'd never been part of the land at all. Like every step I took here had meant nothing. Walking out of that courthouse, I see Cheryl standing by her Mercedes, that victorious smile spread across her perfectly made-up face, like she's posing for a magazine cover about successful women who destroy their enemies without breaking a nail. Her silence wasn't smug. It was calculated, like she was filing away my name under solved. The message is clear: you lose, game over. Thanks for playing. Her lawyer shakes her hand and they chat like old friends, probably planning their next legal massacre, while I stand there feeling like I just got run over by a truck full of reality. On the courthouse steps, a neighbor I used to wave at walked right past me, not angry, not curious, just empty. The worst part is realizing that this was probably never even a challenge for her, just another neighbor who needed to be put in his place, another potential problem solved through superior resources and connections. That night, sitting alone in my house, staring out at her half-built mansion, glowing under the construction lights, like some kind of beacon of stolen dreams, I hit rock bottom harder than I thought possible. Maybe I was wrong about everything. Maybe I should have just minded my own business from the start. Maybe the reason that park disappeared is because it was supposed to disappear, and I'm just too naive to understand how the world really works. The evidence that seemed so compelling in my kitchen now feels like the obsessive scribbling of someone who watched too many conspiracy theory documentaries and started seeing patterns where none existed. I'm wallowing in self-pity and considering whether I can afford to hire a different lawyer or if I should just accept defeat and try to rebuild my life elsewhere when Frank calls. I can hear excitement crackling in his voice like he just discovered electricity, and for a moment, I dare to hope that maybe this nightmare isn't over yet. Connor, you need to sit down. I found something. Remember that Harmony Park proposal I tracked down the original city council meeting, minutes from 1992? He reads directly from the documents with the enthusiasm of someone who just struck gold. Motion to approve Harmony Park Community Project for immediate implementation voted unanimously approved. Allocated budget $2.3 million. Project timeline. Begin construction, spring 1993, completion scheduled for fall 1994. My heart starts racing, and I can feel hope creeping back into my chest like sunlight through storm clouds. Frank, are you saying... I can barely get the words out, afraid that speaking them might make this new information disappear like everything else connected to this case. I'm saying they didn't just approve the park, Connor. According to these records, they actually built it. I nearly dropped the phone, and for a moment I think I might actually be having some kind of breakdown because this is too good to be true. Built it. What happened to it? That's what we need to find out. But Connor, if a completed public park just vanished from all official records, we're not talking about simple property fraud anymore. We're looking at something much bigger. After I hang up, I sit in the dark staring at Cheryl's construction site with my mind reeling like I've just discovered that gravity works backwards. She didn't just steal vacant land, she somehow made an entire completed public park disappear from existence. But here's the thought that's keeping me awake and making my hands shake. If Cheryl has the power to erase a $2.3 million community project from history, like it never existed, then she's not just some HOA president, she's someone with connections that go all the way to the top. She didn't just steal my land, she erased a park from history. And I've got one shot to bring that memory back. Frank works his legal network like a detective in an old noir movie, making phone calls and pulling favors with the kind of methodical determination that makes you believe justice might actually be possible if you're willing to work hard enough for it. He tracks down Richard Davies, who supervised HOA maintenance for 25 years before retiring, and when we first approach him at his modest duplex across town, the man is scared in a way that makes my blood run cold. He's paranoid, looking over his shoulder, like he expects Cheryl to materialize out of thin air with a legal document and a sinister smile. "I can't talk about this," he says immediately, his hands shaking as he grips his coffee mug like it's an anchor to sanity. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. These people, they have long memories and deep pockets, and they don't forget people who cause them trouble." Richard is probably in his late 50s, with the weathered hands of someone who spent decades fixing things that other people broke. And the careful way he keeps glancing at his windows tells me he's been carrying this secret for a long time. His living room is neat and sparse, the kind of place where someone lives quietly and tries not to attract attention. But Frank is persistent in that patient, lawyerly way that wears down resistance through sheer professional determination, and eventually Richard's conscience wins out over his fear. "I helped build that park," he finally admits, his voice barely above a whisper, as he glances around his living room, like the walls might have ears. Beautiful place. Playground equipment, walking trails, covered picnic areas, even a little amphitheater where kids put on summer shows. And the way Richard describes it makes me realize that this wasn't just some abstract community space. This was the heart of the neighborhood, the place where families created memories and children learned what it meant to belong somewhere. Families used it every single day for almost 10 years. Sunday afternoon barbecues, birthday parties, teenagers hanging out after school. It was the heart of the whole neighborhood, the place that made Meadowbrook Estates feel like an actual community instead of just a collection of houses. My hands are shaking now too, because I'm finally hearing about something that was stolen from an entire community, not just from me. What happened to it? Richard's face hardens with an anger that's been simmering for years, and I can see that whatever he's about to tell me is going to change everything. Cheryl happened, Richard says, and the way he spits out her name tells me everything I need to know about how this story ends. He explains how Cheryl orchestrated the park's destruction after becoming HOA, president in 2005, and the systematic nature of it makes my blood run cold because it's exactly the kind of long-term planning that takes a special kind of evil genius. She called the swings dangerous, then shut the paths with tape that never came down. Finally, she said the picnic tables were a magnet for undesirable elements. Piece by piece, she made it vanish with official memos and fake concerns. Richard's voice gets more agitated as he continues reliving years of watching something he helped create get systematically destroyed by someone who saw it as nothing more than an obstacle to her personal ambitions. Every step was planned, every excuse was prepared in advance, and every phase of destruction was designed to look like reasonable municipal management. Little by little, piece by piece, she destroyed everything that made it a community space. And every time someone complained, she had an official reason that sounded reasonable if you didn't look too close. Insurance liability, maintenance costs, safety concerns. She'd show up to city council meetings with charts and statistics that proved how much money the park was costing taxpayers, conveniently forgetting to mention that most of those costs came from the repairs she kept ordering but never completing. Richard's hands clench into fists as he remembers watching the systematic destruction of something he'd helped create with his own hands. In 2010, she convinced the city that the whole area had become a public nuisance, got it officially classified as abandoned property, and all the records were supposed to be transferred to county archives for historical preservation. Richard's voice drops to almost a whisper as he reveals the final piece of the puzzle, and I lean forward because I know this is the smoking gun we've been looking for. But somehow those records never made it to the archives. Every trace of that park just disappeared, like it never existed at all. From an old shoebox that probably hasn't been opened in years, Richard produces photographs that make my heart stop. Children playing on swings, families enjoying picnics, birthday parties under the old oak tree, all taking place on the exact land where Cheryl's mansion now stands. I kept these because I knew someday someone would ask what happened to the kids' park. I never thought it would take this long. Ink bled into meaning. I wasn't tired. I was awake in a way I didn't ask for. Not because I was tired, because I finally saw the scale. This wasn't about trees or trash bins. This was a cover-up of public memory. Looking at those photos of laughing children playing, where Cheryl now has a swimming pool, I'm not angry anymore. I'm something far more dangerous. I'm determined, and I finally understand what we're really fighting for. This isn't about property lines or legal technicalities. It's about the systematic theft of a community's heart by someone who saw other people's happiness as an inconvenience to her personal ambitions. She didn't just build over history. She replaced laughter with landscaping and thought no one would remember the difference. What would you do if you discovered someone had stolen not just property, but an entire community's heart? Would you fight for families who might never even know what they lost? But as I look at Richard's worried face and think about Cheryl's network of connections and influence, one question sends chills down my spine. She erased a park. She built over laughter. Now I'm about to walk straight into the blueprint she left behind, one meant to bury people like me. The second court hearing is nothing like the first, and you can feel the difference in the air like electricity before a thunderstorm that's been building for 20 years. Word has spread through the neighborhood about the vanished park, and the gallery is packed with faces I recognize, neighbors who've been living here for years without knowing what was stolen from under their noses, parents who wondered why their kids had to play in cramped backyards instead of open community spaces, and older residents who remembered when Meadowbrook Estates actually felt like a place where families mattered more than property values. Cheryl arrives in her usual perfect outfit, designer suit, flawless makeup, that practiced confident smile, but I notice her hands trembling slightly as she arranges her papers. Her lawyer looks less comfortable too, probably because he's finally realized he's defending someone who erased a children's playground to build a swimming pool, and even expensive legal training doesn't prepare you for that level of moral bankruptcy. Frank presents our case methodically, like he's conducting a symphony of evidence that builds to an inevitable crescendo of justice that's been delayed for far too long. The courtroom is completely silent as he speaks, and I can see people in the gallery leaning forward to catch every word. First, the original 1992 park approval and budget allocation, complete with city council signatures and official seals that prove this wasn't just some pie-in-the-sky proposal that never got off the ground. Then Richard's construction photos showing families enjoying the completed park throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. Real people, real memories, real community life happening exactly where Cheryl's mansion now stands. Next, the maintenance records documenting the systematic safety violations that led to each phase of destruction, each one signed off by Cheryl personally, with reasons that sound increasingly flimsy when read aloud in court. Every piece of evidence lands like a physical blow, and I watch Cheryl's confident facade crack a little more with each revelation. Her lawyer keeps glancing at her with the kind of expression you get when you realize your client has been lying to you from day one, and you're about to get professionally embarrassed in front of a room full of people. By the time Frank finishes presenting our case, the courtroom feels like a morgue where someone's reputation just died, and that someone is sitting at the defendant's table trying to maintain her composure while her entire world falls apart in real time. I almost feel sorry for her, but then I remember those photos of children playing, where her swimming pool now sits, and any sympathy I might have had evaporates like morning mist. When Richard takes the witness stand, you could hear a pin drop in that courtroom, and even the court reporter looks affected by his testimony. His voice shakes with emotion as he describes what he witnessed, and I can see people in the gallery wiping their eyes as he speaks. I watched one neighbor cry when they tore down the swing set where she'd pushed her grandchildren every Sunday for 5 years. Cheryl told her it was for everyone's safety, but we all knew what it was really for. I watched birthday parties get moved to cramped backyards because there was nowhere else for kids to play. I watched the community lose its heart, one demolished picnic table at a time. That swing set wasn't metal, it was memory. When it came down, so did everything this neighborhood used to mean. His voice breaks slightly as he continues, and I realize that this isn't just about stolen land. It's about stolen childhood memories and destroyed community bonds that can never be fully restored. And through it all, Cheryl kept talking about improvements and modernization. But the only thing that got built on that land was her mansion. While families were losing their gathering place, she was planning her dream house with a swimming pool, right where children used to play on swings. Richard's testimony is devastating, not because it's dramatic, but because it's so simple and honest. This is a man who spent his career maintaining community spaces, and he's describing the systematic destruction of something beautiful by someone who saw other people's happiness as an obstacle to her personal ambitions. Frank displays a side-by-side comparison that devastates Cheryl's defense like a nuclear bomb made of photographic evidence, and the gas from the gallery is audible when people see what he's showing them. On the left, a photo from 2009 showing children playing on the park's swing sets, their faces bright with the kind of joy that makes childhood worth remembering. On the right, a current photo of Cheryl's swimming pool in the exact same location, complete with expensive tile work and a diving board that probably cost more than most families spend on their kids' education. The contrast is so stark, so morally obscene, that several people in the gallery actually gasp out loud. "Mrs. Cheryl," Frank says, his voice calm but deadly, "can you explain to this court how a children's playground became your private swimming pool?" The question hangs in the air like a sword about to fall, and everyone in the courtroom turns to stare at the woman who stole their children's laughter to build her own personal paradise. Her blazer looked sharp as ever, but her hands were shaking, her voice cracked, and when Frank asked the final question, she didn't answer. She just sat there, jaw slack, mascara cracking. Frank cuts her off with surgical precision that would make a coroner proud. "According to these maintenance records, Mrs. Cheryl, the playground equipment was less than 3 years old when you had it condemned and removed." She opens her mouth to respond, closes it, tries again, and then simply deflates like a punctured balloon. She wasn't a villain anymore, just a woman exposed under fluorescent lights, undone by her own paperwork. The judge's voice cuts through the silence like a blade that's been sharpened for 20 years. This court finds overwhelming evidence of fraudulent property acquisition through systematic deception and destruction of public assets. The defendant will immediately forfeit all illegally obtained properties and reimburse the city $2.3 million for park reconstruction plus as punitive damages. Cheryl's $4 million mansion, condemned and scheduled for demolition within 30 days. No one clapped, No one cheered. The silence in that courtroom said more than any verdict ever could. This wasn't a win. It was a reckoning. As people file out of the courtroom, I see Cheryl sitting alone at the defendant's table, staring at her manicured hands like she's never seen them before. For just a moment, pity flickered. Then I remembered the dust where a child's swing used to be. But then I think about all those stolen summer afternoons, all those birthday parties that never happened, all those kids who lost their safe place to play so one woman could have a bigger backyard. My elderly neighbor approaches me outside the courthouse, his eyes bright with tears. "Thank you," he says simply. "My grandkids used to love that park. I never thought I'd see swings there again." 6 months later, I'm standing where Cheryl's mansion used to be, watching kids play on brand new playground equipment that sparkles in the afternoon sun like hope made manifest. The park is back and better than before, with updated safety features and a small bronze plaque that reads, "Harmony Park, restored 2024 for all our children." A little girl with pigtails runs past me toward the swings, giggling as her mom chases after her, with that patient, loving expression that only parents have when their children are truly happy. She's running right through the spot where Cheryl's front door used to be, and there's something beautifully poetic about children's laughter, replacing stolen dreams. But here's what I've realized: this was never really about property lines or legal technicalities. It was about something fundamental, the idea that some things shouldn't be for sale, no matter how much money you have. Community spaces, children's laughter, the simple joy of families gathering together. Cheryl thought she could buy anything, even other people's dreams. But dreams don't die quietly. They echo. And sometimes those echoes wake up a whole neighborhood. Watching the swings go up, where her front gate used to stand, I realized this was never just about land. It was about hope, and fighting for something bigger than yourself. I'm not angry anymore. I'm proud. Proud I stayed. Proud I stood up. And proud that just this once the good guys won. Maybe the real lesson is that truth will always find a way to rise, especially when someone's willing to hold the line. If you're still here, I'd love to hear what part stuck with you most. Leave a comment, subscribe to QA Stories, and if you'd like to help the channel grow, that little thanks button down below means a lot. Catch you in the next one.
We're QA Stories, and this is just one of many unbelievable tales. Catch more by checking out the next video. We promise it's even wilder.